President Trump and his wife, First Lady Melania Trump, touching down in Rome to attend tomorrow's funeral of Pope Francis, the first foreign trip of his second term. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is live for us at the White House. And Jeff, on the plane, the president addressed reporters on several topics. What did he have to say?
He did, Jake. First and foremost was again talking about that ongoing attempt to reach a ceasefire in Ukraine. Of course, this has been a frustration of the president that Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky have not been able to reach an accord. But the president, just a few moments ago after landing, he sent out this synopsis on Truth Social. Let's take a quick look at it. He said, it was a good day in talks and meetings with Russia and Ukraine. They are very close to a deal, and the two sides should meet now at very high levels to finish it off. Most of the major points, he says, have been agreed to. Stop the bloodshed now. So we shall see if there is any movement on this front. Of course, the president vented his frustration at Vladimir Putin just a day ago after that one of the most deadliest bombings since last summer that Russia inflicted again on Kyiv. This is all coming as one of the president's top envoys was meeting in Moscow with Vladimir Putin as well. But the president also talked, Jake, about other potential meetings he could have with world leaders while attending the Pope's funeral.
Who were you attending?
Some people in Rome, yes. And a little bit quickly, and frankly, it's a little disrespectful to have meetings when you're at the funeral of a pope. They say. But I'll be talking to people. I'll be seeing a lot of people, including the Prime Minister of Italy.
Well, of course, the Prime Minister of Italy was just in Washington last week. A bigger question is, would the president meet President Zelensky of Ukraine? And that still is an open question, Jake.
And President Zelensky has said he plans to attend tomorrow's funeral. Time magazine just published an interview with President Trump. We're going to talk to the editor in a second. The president was asked about the war in Ukraine. How did he respond?
He was, Jake, and it's, again, making clear as the president is reaching his 100th day in office, this is one of the frustrations, largely because he set expectations so high that he would be able to end this war quickly. But he did address that specifically. A very interesting answer here in the Time magazine interview. Let's take a look at that. He said, well, I said that figuratively, that he could end the war on day one. I said that as an exaggeration, the president said, because to make a point, it gets, of course, he said, by fake news. Obviously, people knew when I said that. They were saying it in jest, but it was also said that that's when it would be ended. So the bottom line here is he said that he could end this war on day one in office. Jake, we're nearing day 100, and the war, as we know, still rages on.
All right, Jeff Zeleny at the White House, thank you. For more on that wide-ranging Time magazine interview with President Trump, let's bring in the editor-in-chief of Time magazine, Sam Jacobs. So the interview was conducted by you, Sam, and your senior political correspondent, Eric Cortesella. We just heard Zeleny quoting part of your interview with the president, in which he says he was exaggerating when he would say the war in Ukraine would end on day one. We should know this is Time magazine's fourth interview with President Trump since he won the Republican nomination last spring. What is your biggest takeaway from what you've heard from Trump then to now, almost 100 days into his second term?
I think this is, as you said, a rare long-form interview with the president. Time has sat down with him now on 4 occasions since he first clinched the Republican nomination last spring. I think the atmosphere is just so different. Previously, when we've talked about him, he's been loose and celebratory. He's been at moments of, peak achievement, clinching the nomination, winning the presidency. There's a sense of maybe tightness that's surrounding him a little bit, a sense of restriction. There are all these crises brewing, and there is an air of defensive on a number of these points. When we tried to push him in places and said, well, you said this about Ukraine, as Jeff Zeleny pointed out, his response was, well, I didn't really mean it. That was figurative. I was exaggerating. And so it's very interesting to see that he feels the pressure now coming on, and he recognizes. In fact, we talked about, you've made cuts to national security. If there were an attack on the homeland, would you be blamed? And he said, yeah, the president is held accountable. And so we are hearing from him, it's not necessarily in his character, but a sense of accountability for certain things that are happening under his watch.
So since his return to power, President Trump has certainly asserted control over Congress. He's gone after universities, law firms. He disagrees, however, that he's expanding the power of the presidency. He says, quote, I don't feel I'm expanding it. I think I'm using it as it was meant to be used, unquote. When Time asked if he's concentrating more power in the office of the president since he took office, he said, quote, "I don't think so. I think I'm using it properly, and I'm also using it as per my election," unquote. What was your reaction to hearing that?
The president loves performing the act of the presidency. In fact, during the middle of our interview, he stopped the conversation to take a call from the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, and had us sit there and watch him while this call took place. He enjoys being seen as president, but I think for the most part, this sense of accountability really has changed, and he doesn't really want to own up to the fact that he's changing what he's doing. It's interesting, he said, well, I was just being figurative about Ukraine, but when I expand the powers of the presidency, I'm just doing what I said I was going to do. So there's a real tension and a real difficulty there in trying to understand what the president thinks of what he's doing.
We've seen a lot of volatility in world markets since so-called Liberation Day, but even before that, just as President Trump is trying to enact these economic policies, including these historic tariffs on a wide variety of imports. Now, Time asked if there are still high tariffs from 20% up to 50% a year from now, would he consider that a victory? And he said, quote, "Total victory." So why does he think that?
This is a really hard ball to follow. At the same time, he told us that this would all be settled within 3 to 4 weeks, that there are 200 deals in place, that he's talking to China, an account that the Chinese had denied immediately afterwards. We saw all these statements move the market before it was opening today, moved futures. So it's very hard to figure out the president, who's very comfortable talking about holding these tariffs up, also at the same time really seems to say, well, this is all going to get settled really quickly.
200 deals, even though there are only 193 countries. That's something.
It's impressive.
President Trump has talked about running for a third term, despite the 22nd Amendment, which would prohibit him from being elected to more than 2 terms as president. You asked what method he would use to get around that. He said, quote, "I'd rather not discuss that now. But as you know, there are some loopholes that have been discussed that are well known, but I don't believe in loopholes. I don't believe in using loopholes." It's tough to tell whether these Trump 2028 hats that the Trump team is starting to unveil, whether this is just a master troll trying to get the media and the Democrats all a tizzy, or if they actually mean it. I kind of think they mean it. What do you think?
Hard to tell when you don't know whether they're being figurative or literal. Certainly when we asked the president a year ago, what are you going to do if you win? He said, I'm going to run and have one more term, I'm going to do a great job, and I'm going to be done. When I asked him, would you run as J.D. Vance's vice president, a maneuver that might be constitutional and certainly mirrors things we've seen in places like Russia, he said, I don't know anything about that, and then questioned the cognitive abilities of the reporters who were talking to him. I think he enjoys the cat and mouse game of talking through this. I think it's very hard for us to say what his intention is. It's dangerous to try to read into his psychology. But if I had to guess, I do think he's sort of trying to get a troll out of us.
Yeah. Of course, he'll also turn 79 in June, so we'll see what Father Time has to say about that third term as well. Sam Jacobs, thank you so much. Appreciate it.